Hello, this is Taha.
And this is Anaina.
This is Movie Masala.
And we're here to yap at you about films we watched recently.
And today we're doing The Heretic.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You mentioned you might be interested in learning more about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Yeah.
Mr. Reed, we would like to give you this booklet as it will help you understand the restoration.
I actually have one already, but you can never have too many.
It tells you all the ways Heavenly Father can reveal His gospel. As a part of His plan,
Thank you.
God chooses prophets such as Adam, Noah, Abraham, and Moses.
So I'm going to start off with the premise of this film, right? It's about these two young girls from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
Of course it is. Yeah.
otherwise called Mormons, who go to talk to this man's house, Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, who played phenomenally by Hugh Grant. We'll get into that. In order to talk to him about religion, he purposely tells that he's interested in learning about the faith. That's
So
why
he
they go.
invites them in.
They go to him knowing he wants to learn more.
Okay.
It's more of a house call,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
And it focuses on certain like fundamental truths of religion
Okay.
very directly. This is not subtext, it is just text.
Perfect. I love when text is just text.
Yeah. Okay. It's a horror thriller, right? And
Right.
it succeeds at being a good horror thriller because it creates tension so well out of almost nothing.
See, we were just talking about this. I'm never going to watch this film because I don't do horror films. And it's because of that tension, because it just makes me so nervous and anxious. And so this is great. This is just, I get to learn about this horror movie without ever having to put myself through it.
Fair. I'm going to tell you all about it because I
Yeah.
genuinely really like this movie, right? Again, pretty obvious. Scariest thing is your imagination, right?
Yeah.
And this film kind of understands that in a very simple way. It does it, which is simple wide angle pans, tracking shots, done extremely slowly that just instill you with a sense of dread, because until that camera pans to the subject again, you're like, is something going to go wrong? Is something going wrong? What is happening? Even though on paper, nothing is wrong, you're still like eerie, and it keeps doing that, and it builds upon this later on with acting, with the plot, but it starts from there.
Okay. I mean, that's a good horror film.
It's a good horror film in that
Yeah.
way, right? The terror lies in the uncertainty of where this is going and what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Again, as I mentioned, it builds upon it effectively. A key part of this is the performances.
Mm-hmm.
Primarily, it's Hugh Grant's performance, who everyone has been
I
raving
mean,
about.
I find the reason why I heard about this movie was because everyone was like, Hugh Grant, the rom-com guy, is doing a horror film. And I was like, I'm so interested because I don't think he's a good rom-com guy. Unpopular opinion.
Ooh.
I just think he's too snarky and arrogant for that. But it makes sense that he did good in this horror film, though, because it makes sense with my version of what I believe a Hugh Grant movie is like.
Okay, on that, he uses his charm and mannerism so well to lure you in at the start,
Mm-hmm.
and then peppers in this uncomfortability
Mm-hmm.
and like this creepy old guy kind of behaviors.
Okay.
And like it'll be like, okay, come in, yes, my wife is making some pie, what flavors do you like? And then a weird question of, if you don't mind me asking, how did your dad die? It's so weird and uncomfortable.
It's the uncanny.
It's the, oh, that's perfect, it's the uncanny. And then immediately following up that with like, well, let's go get pie.
It's the uncanny. It's called the unheimlich. It came out of like German and Russian storytelling. Mainly German because the word is German. But yeah, it's a very specific genre of writing. And that gets translated into a lot of good horror films.
Yeah. So he plays what I can basically very well succinctly describe as a Reddit atheist's wet dream.
I love that description. Okay.
Hugh Grant plays a Reddit atheist's wet dream. Clip this.
Elaborate.
So the directors Scott Beck, Brian Wood talked about how much Hugh Grant got into character for this film, and it shows, right? It's also the casting of Hugh Grant. Like you mentioned, for you, Hugh Grant's never been this rom-com guy. Like he doesn't do rom-coms though. For the rest of the world, Hugh Grant is very has a
he
rom-com.
is the rom-com.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, So when you expect this charming old British man, and then the film uses that expectation to make you even scared. Because it's scary walking into an alley knowing something might go wrong. It's scarier when you walk into a place knowing everything's fine and then something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And this is something that the film is a very central to this theme, and I'll keep coming back to it in this review. The idea of like the uncertainty, the unknowing being more scarier, right? So it's less of him being a physical threat and more of his like planning and control of that scenario.
Right, yeah.
Also, I wanted to highlight Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, who plays Sister Barnes and Paxton respectively. Their performances are also really good, and a lot of their performances is built up on reaction to Hugh Grant.
That makes sense.
Hugh Grant, to the scenario, and they do that really well. And specifically what I mean is they command the audience's emotions through theirs really well.
Right, so they are a reflection of what an audience would have been.
Exactly. A great example of this. There's this one scene where it is like kind of comedic, where Hugh Grant's character makes an analogy of Monopoly and religion and talks about iteration. And he talks about like different versions of Monopoly being different like monotheistic religions. And then he goes like the Book of Mormon, this quirky regional variant, and then he puts Bob Ross Monopoly in front of the table. That's funny. It's objectively funny, and you do chuckle. But because of the actresses, you immediately snap back to being scared again.
Yeah. So they're basically what's tethering us to the world of the film.
100%. Because without them, this film can very easily again just go into that, like I mentioned, that Reddit atheist kind of thing of like, I am right, there is no God kind of vibe, right?
Yeah.
But the film is never trying to really say that. The film is not saying that this religion is right or that religion is wrong.
Okay.
What the film is rather more focused on is any sense of that level of extreme conviction towards anything is a problem.
Okay. I see that.
Another great way to phrase that is that it's hard to come out of this film thinking the atheist is the good guy, but simultaneously, it is hard to come out of this film thinking that the religion is the answer.
So they're not going organized religion is the sole evil. They're also going any kind of fixed, firm, unchanging, imposing belief is wrong.
Yeah, that's very much at the center of this film, of like an extreme conviction that just imposes control is the problem. And
doesn't matter where it comes from.
Doesn't matter where it comes from, right?
Okay.
Right. If you
That's a good nuanced perspective to have.
Yeah. And it engages with all of these things very textually. Like they are just debates that happen within the
So
film.
it's not something that you have to read into. It's just something it tells you.
It's some parts you do read more into, but most of this is just very much in your face.
Okay.
Right. And a part of this is also because it gives agencies to the female leads to not just be victims, but also fight back.
Also, not just to listen to a man,
but also debate him back. So the same point where Hugh Grant brings up that Monopoly board game example, brings up other cultures who have variations on like a Jesus-like figure. Sophie Thatcher's character rebuts that, talking about this is a very simplified version of this and that you're ignoring the differences here. Because otherwise it just becomes one-sided. But because it engages with the premise this way, you never think either of them has fully right answers. At least that's what I took out of it.
Yeah. Okay, that's a very content-heavy horror film, which is not something that I'm used to. Or I think the genre is used to. Which is why maybe would you call it a psychological thriller rather than a horror film?
Honestly, a psychological thriller is not a bad way to phrase this film.
Okay.
But it does engage in horror very directly.
Right, rather than the genre-based conventions of a psychological thriller.
Yeah, it definitely engages in both. Again, like circling back to the Reddit atheist thing, it's like if you know these circles, you know the online behavior, it's the urge to prove that it stems so fully from the urge to prove that you're right. And that mimics the same religious zeal that they're trying to criticize.
I understand. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so it criticizes both sides fairly. And again, it's like people have debated religion for millennia, right? And at the end of the day, it comes down to belief. Nobody is here proving if God exists or not. And that is very much this film. It's the idea that nothing else matters. The end goal is belief. It's simultaneously belief is the problem, while belief is also the solution.
Makes sense why it's called Heretic then.
Yeah, 100%. Lastly, it's horror is also molded around this religion as well. Like I keep coming back to how it uses its genre conventions and its topic very well, right? Hugh Grant's character says that belief and disbelief are both equally terrifying.
Yes.
And fear does play a big part in religion. The fear of God, the fear of hell, all of the fear is so the fear is from the unknowing, the fear of I don't know if I'm right or wrong, and that's what creates this sense of dread in the film, right? Where there is a fear of uncertainty of like, is Hugh Grant right? And one of the characters trying to engage with like, if we just keep following him, maybe we get out of this alive. Or no, what if he's wrong and that's the point and that's how we get out. But you don't know
You
until
don't know
you
how
get
you're
out.
going to survive.
Yeah, until you get out, you don't know which answer was the correct answer.
You don't know how you're going to survive until you survive.
Yeah, very much so, right? So the fear of uncertainty plays a big part in this film. I'll just do like a last spoiler bit, which like ties back into this. This film never introduces anything supernatural. It toys with that idea. It does kind of bring it in, only to kind of disavow it later on.
Right. Because that makes sense if it's a film about the uncertainties of religious belief. Because religion has a lot of, I wouldn't say supernatural, but a lot of superstition that tethers into the supernatural attached to it. So it makes sense that it brings it in and then goes, nope.
Yeah, because I think this film just works better without that supernatural element.
Yeah.
It's more tangible. It feels more scary and real to not have like any supernatural, any divine things in this film. It's not like The Nun. It's not like The Exorcist where there is a clear villain in religion or like opposition of religion, right?
Yeah.
The evil is in some sense the idea again of faith itself.
Yeah.
Right? But
Which
again, faith is the savior.
Arguably, I believe that having something that's not supernatural, I mean, I'm terrified of supernatural stuff as well, but something that is real is more terrifying than something that has the potential not to be.
Exactly. I think this is what the film does in its cinematography, in its writing, in its direction, in its acting. All of these things are centered to this idea of like, it's scarier to not know what the correct answer is, right? So again, I would 100% urge people to watch it. It's not a horror movie in that sense. It has a lot of fresh things that it brings. Barely like 1 or 2 jump scares in this film. Everything else does the horror very organically. And it leaves you with this hollow and unsure feeling when you come out, which is so critical to the film. Last thing, I just want to quickly shout out this one shot which has been in my head and I just want to replicate. It's this song where one of the characters is coming out of like these labyrinthine passageways, and you see Hugh Grant's model of the labyrinth, and you can see her like as a small version in that, and she then pops out of the door in that same shot. And it's just such a well-designed shot. It's hard to explain it verbally.
I can imagine it.
But I'm like, whoever thought of that, you popped off with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's The Heretic. This has been our episode of Movie Masala. This podcast is produced solely by us, musical assets from Pixabay. I hope you enjoyed this episode and see you again next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.